Sorry for the late start. We had an H2B meeting in here earlier. We had to reset the room. So we will kick it off and get started, and we'll do it with call of the roll. Dorothy Savarese.
Here.
Andy Northcross.
Here.
Aaron Gardner.
Here.
And Wolf.
Here.
It's a guy on.
There is always the first here. Wonder what's going on.
No,
Bless you, Karen.
Take myself off mute. Thank you.
No, there's been a lot of technical issues today.
Yeah.
I was in a meeting that every time the person, even when we shared the link from the meeting, it kept sending him to another meeting. Every single, so, and like I literally clicked share link. Hey, Wendy, how you doing?
I saw I was trying to get in, but my camera wouldn't come on. But I got you're on mute mug. I love that. I need one.
Yeah.
Or that little stick signs. That's a great idea.
Yeah, I love that, the stick, you know, just like, whoop. Hi, Christy, how are you?
Good morning. How is everyone?
Just
Good.
ducky.
We're hoping we're not up on the screen and they're not listening to this whole conversation this whole time.
They are.
Wendy, how are you feeling?
Yeah.
It's been 3 weeks of, just being kind of out of it. I'm on round 2 for COVID.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, let's translate. I had the first round was worse. So of course I got meds, and then I guess that causes a rebound, which just puts you in this like low place. So nothing to do but give into it. And anyway, here I am.
Sorry. Hey, Robin. Oh, this is a sign of life. Oh, I'm so sorry. So is it the rebound that you have or another version?
I don't know. Actually, my doctor's great. She's going to check in with me this afternoon, but I thought maybe I got a variant in between, but it's probably more just a rebound. Yeah. Pfizer actually has a website where you can, if you took the Paxlovid, you can go on to their website and tell them, what you did when and how you're feeling now and what other medicines you take and what, they're trying to figure it out. They're trying to hunt down what seems to be a growing percentage of people that get a rebound if they take the Paxlovid. So
yeah. And they kept referring to it when some high profile people had the rebound as rare. And I kept thinking, I know literally one person who took Paxlovid who didn't have a rebound.
Wow.
One. And I know a bunch of people that took it. So we shouldn't put our healthcare professional on the spot here. But Karen, what do you think about it?
So, and I am not really a healthcare professional, but what I will say is far too many people are taking that medication and it's not indicated.
Interesting.
Oh.
Yeah. But that's from, what I hear from our medical staff, because, you see these billboards going into Boston, there's a pill for that. And they just tear their hair out because it really isn't indicated for everyone. It was not meant for that. And I think it's just being billeted globally. And
I'll be right back.
Who am I to say?
And there's big issues with the statins too, right?
Yeah,
when people are on statins. It's like, it's really, be really careful.
Yeah.
Oh, really? Oh, goodness. Oh, I see Paul. Hello.
And I'm not going to have my camera on, but I'm here. This is Dan.
Hey, Dan.
Is Paul having trouble getting in?
We're seeing a fuzzy picture now from the OWL camera, my least favorite camera. I see Sean. I see someone I don't know. Hello. And see Paul.
Nothing ever happens around here except all at the same time. As soon as you get on a Zoom call, people show up at your door and it's like, what's with that? The cat wants to be fed. You know, it's like, come on.
Okay.
Uh-oh. Meeting owl is not our friend.
Dorothy held up her mug.
Yeah.
They can't. Are we on mute?
Come on, you.
Is that it? Is that simple? This is why we need Brian.
Yeah. Can you hear me now? No.
Yes.
Yes?
Yay.
Okay, awesome. And sorry for the late start. We had an H2B meeting in here earlier, we had to reset the room. So we will kick it off and get started, and we'll do it with call of the roll. Dorothy Savarese,
Here.
Andy Northcross,
Here.
Aaron Gardner,
Here.
and Wolf,
Here.
Lisa Guyon,
Here.
Kristen O'Malley.
Here.
And Sean is not going to be able to join us today, so I think that is everybody. So the next item on the agenda is the approval of the August 10th, 2022 meeting minutes. Do I have a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second,
Second.
Wendy.
Okay. All in favor?
Need a roll call?
Okay,
Paul.
we're going to take a roll call. Dorothy,
Hi.
Wendy,
Aye.
Lisa.
Do I have to abstain if I wasn't at the meeting?
Yeah.
No.
Yes, I abstain.
Okay. Kristen.
Aye.
Aaron.
Aye.
Dan.
Aye.
All right, the meeting minutes are approved. So today could possibly be our last meeting. We're going to have a discussion of the county projects. There's been a lot of work done by Beth and Vera and the county staff on those county projects as it relates to water quality. And then we have to discuss the housing piece too. So we'll see how we feel towards the end of the meeting. Possibility we would have one more remaining meeting just to sort of deal with some of the specifics of the housing recommendations. But maybe we can get there today. We'll see. So with that, I will turn it over to Beth to make a presentation on the county projects related to water quality.
Thank you, Paul. Good afternoon or good morning, everyone. No, good afternoon. Almost afternoon. First of all, thank you all for being here this morning. I don't have my computer, so I'm going to be looking over at the screen. It's been a while since we've met, and during that time, county staff, myself, Vera Harik, and Kara Hughes have met with different departments in Barnstable County and worked really diligently with those departments to come up with a really strong list of proposed county projects that would be funded by ARPA. Vera put together a summary of all of those. It's in a spreadsheet, which all of you received. I can, Paul, I'll take my lead from you. I can go through each and every one, or I can just summarize and then we can talk about individual projects.
Yeah, why don't we start with a summary?
Okay, very good. So, the summary is we have.
Can I share my screen to put it up, this summary?
Yeah, that'd be
Certainly,
good.
that would be
Like that?
great.
Okay.
Yeah, yeah, I was running late. I don't have my computer. So we're gonna put the
Give
PowerPoint
me 1 second.
or put the summary slide up.
It's opening.
Okay. Just 1 sec.
Go ahead, then, I'll pull it up.
All right. So in summary, I'll start with the big number. The county projects, the total county projects recommended for funding through ARPA totals $13,705,159. And that also, that includes one regional housing strategy through the commission that's already been, was already approved and appropriated, funding has been appropriated for. So in looking at the summary, the Health Department, the Cape Cod Commission, the Department of Human Services, and the County Dredge, as well as County Administration and Finance, all have recommended projects. So I'm going to start with the Health Department. So we worked, and Sean O'Brien is here as well as Brian Baumgartel. Thank you for being here to answer any questions that might come up. But the county has, Health Department has put in projects around the contract epidemiologist. There's funding for emergency preparedness. There's funding for a community health nursing program needs assessment. So those are in the public health arena. And each of those proposed projects, Sean and his staff put together a comprehensive background information and rationale for each of those projects. We did work closely with the health department and reviewed all of them. In addition to the public health recommended projects, there's also some water, what I call under the big water quality bucket. A PFAS identification and analysis program, funding for the Mass Alternative Septic System Technology Center, funding for the Alternative Septic System Responsible Management Entity Program, some investments in the County Water Quality Lab, harmful algae bloom and assessment and monitoring, and then funding for some staffing for what we're calling the Barnstable County. I think it was just named yesterday, the Aqua Fund. This is the fund that is the expansion of the septic loan fund to include alternative septics and sewer hookups for homeowners on Barnstable County. So the total projects from the health department comes out to $5,390,000, 511.
Almost there.
Okay, we've almost got it up.
All right.
Moving on to the commission, the Cape Cod Commission, previously the advisory group had recommended the regional housing strategy. That project, the appropriation went through both the commissioners and the Assembly of Delegates. And so that about $1 million regional housing strategy has already been funded. But in addition, the commission has one other ARPA eligible or ARPA recommended project, and that's for a broadband internet cell network assessment. So the total recommended county projects for the commission through ARPA funding is 1.3 million. The Department of Human Services has, actually, we're recommending two programs. One was discussed at length at a previous advisory committee meeting when we had folks come in and we had public meetings around housing. That's the Regional Shared Housing Services office. So this is funding for that to bring that office up, as well as a regional needs assessment around children's behavioral health. The total funding for the Human Services Department is $440,000, 813. The Cooperative Extension had proposed a project for a hazardous waste program, permanent year-round collection facility. After thoroughly reviewing that project, at this point, it's on hold. There isn't, it's premature actually to fund this out of ARPA is our recommendation. Although we are, have opened the door and are continuing to work with the Cooperative Extension about potentially funding a portion of moving that hazardous waste program, permanent year-round collection facility forward. But at this point, it was premature, given the timelines that we have for ARPA and that the funds have to be obligated by 12/31/24 and have to be spent by 12/31/26. The county dredge program has about $1 million, a little bit over $1 million for an investment in the county dredge program. Primarily, that $1 million ask is for equipment and parts for the dredge program. For those of you that know the dredge program, it's you have to constantly invest in the equipment that's needed for dredging. So that's a very, very high level overview. I have to go back to one that I missed, but a very high level overview of the departments, the Health Department, the Commission, Department of Human Services, and the county dredge. In addition, the Commissioner's Office, Administration and Finance has also recommended some projects for funding. One is Barnstable County needs to invest in putting all of our records in digital format. And so that's a provision of government services ask the Finance Department put forward. We also have a very large coming up a program with our PFAS remediation at the former Fire Training Academy for a pump and treat system. That pump and treat system right now is estimated to cost about $4 million. We've also included some funding for coordination or staffing positions for the different water quality initiatives that the county is currently running and hopefully will be adding if these recommended projects for the Health Department are funded, as well as some of the housing initiative management. So we have two short-term, probably contracted positions that we'd like to fund to bring in to help kind of move both of these initiatives forward around water quality and housing. And so the Commissioner's Administration and Finance ask is $5.5 million. Again, the total county recommended projects, the total is $13,705,159, less what we've already appropriated for the regional housing strategy. So for today's purposes, it's $12,758,000. And I will pause there to take questions.
It was just that I've got a bit of an analysis there relative to our projects. Of which buckets they fall into on a percentage basis. Obviously, the lion's share being water quality, which is also the lion's share of the projects coming in from the towns. The 10 million that's been set aside for the towns, almost exclusively water related projects.
Thank you.
Great. Do we have any questions from the members? Seeing none initially, I just have the improvements to the lab, will that allow testing for nitrogen and cyanobacteria? Or?
Yes.
Yeah.
No.
Awesome.
Yeah, part of that is to increase nutrient monitoring, also cyanobacteria testing.
That's great. That's great. And then is there some, the ARPA fund is the new septic loan trust fund?
That was the name that was proposed yesterday. I was recommended by the Health Department, by Brian and the commissioners.
I sense you're trying to step away from the name for any responsibility for name, but it's.
It was a hard acronym, Paul.
Yeah.
It was a really hard acronym.
Yeah. It's good though. I like it. But will there be more coordination between the Aqua Fund and the Water Pollution Trust Fund?
To make that.
Yes, I think that's something that has been noted, and I think in my thinking through where we need with the water initiative, the kind of the coordination, that's a role that person would play.
Right, and so, and that position,
I put it in the administration.
On row 9.
Commissioners administration, because there's other water quality, the thinking is, I mean, there's other departments working on water type
Yeah.
issues, and it makes sense to have a person kind of overseeing but coordinating and making sure everyone's communicating, and that we're also reaching out to our very important community stakeholders.
yes. So, that position will work with you over the coming months to look at a way to coordinate water quality at the county level. Water quality
Correct.
activities. Awesome. Okay, do we have any other, I see we do have, Lisa.
I was just curious if there were other recommendations that didn't make the cut. I mean, without like a decision-making rubrics or something, the human services feels fairly light compared to some of the other departments. I just wondered if, I know that you're working with constraints, so.
Both of their requests came in.
Yeah, so Lisa, just to answer your question, there were one project that I didn't mention that is also on hold. There was, like I said, we had worked with the cooperative extension, and the decision was made to put the permanent year-round collection facility for household and hazardous waste on hold. The other project in human services that we put on hold was a regional needs assessment around race, social determinants of health, and access to care. And the reason we did that is that there seemed to be a lot of a lot of efforts underway around this, and it just, at this point, not sure it was the right time to invest in a regional needs assessment, since I think there's a lot of work going on. I think the role, I've talked at length with our new Human Rights Advisory Commission coordinator. This is something that the Human Rights Advisory Commission is very interested in, and Vera and I have already started kind of making those connections internally within the county, as well as externally, the groups that are working on this. So that was a project that had been initially recommended, and at this point is on hold, which is not to say at some point in the future, we may want to revisit that.
Great, thank you. Dorothy.
Thank you. And thanks again for this detailed explanation, so helpful. In terms of the Barnstable County Housing Initiative Management, just wondering what the vision is for that consultant or position. If you could just elaborate on that a little bit.
Certainly. So, I mean, one of the things we've talked about is if we're going to be growing, for example, the Regional Shared Housing Services Office in the Department of Human Services, that office also is involved with funding, federal funding that comes to the region for permanent supportive housing for people who are formerly homeless. That department also runs another HUD program that has to do with the home program for affordable housing. So you have just those three. At this point, if we move forward with the Regional Shared Housing Services, there's those three programs that need to be integrated, as well as, you know, what's going to be coming out of the regional housing strategy and how to move forward with implementation of the recommendations that is going to come out of that work that the commission is undertaking. And so we put it in as a consultant position because, again, with the constraints of the timing constraints of ARPA, having to obligate the funds by 12/31/24 and having to expend it all. I think it's an opportunity for us to really look and then see where we might want to grow as a county in regards to housing. But I think we don't have I'll speak for myself. The administration does not have the capacity to look at this, nor does the Department of Human Services. And so I think this is appropriately positioned or situated in the commissioner's office under administration, because again, it can look at the different internal projects we're working in, hopefully work towards implementing some of the strategies that are going to be coming out of the regional housing strategy study. I don't know where to
Thank you.
look, so.
Yeah, no,
Okay.
thank you. That's an excellent explanation. Paul, may I just ask one follow-up question?
Please do.
Thank you. And again, that's exciting and really well thought out. It's just a process question, which is recommended county ARPA projects needing review and approval. What is being asked of this group here today vis-a-vis these projects?
So what we would like is for the advisory group to basically endorse these recommendations so that we could move it forward to the next step, which is appropriation through the county commissioners and the Assembly of Delegates.
Thank you.
Are there any additional questions from the panel? From anyone? Seeing no questions, I would entertain a motion to recommend approval of the slate of projects here to the commissioners.
So moved, Wendy.
Wendy's moved.
Second, Dorothy.
Okay, great. So we will take a roll call. Wendy Northcross,
Yes.
Kristen O'Malley,
Yes.
Karen Gardner,
Yes.
Lisa Guyon,
Yes.
Dorothy Savarese,
Yes.
Dan Wolf.
Did you hear you? Jen, are you there?
Dan, you may be on
Hey,
mute.
No, I'm not on mute. I was in a tunnel. I'm heading to New York City. Yes, to the degree that it matters. And I kind of echo Dorothy's question, which is, I'm not sure exactly what we're doing, but I support the projects that are being recommended.
Okay, so that motion passes, and just for as a point of clarification, so this committee voted two positions to oversee both to participate in sort of organizing water quality efforts on the county and housing efforts on the county. Those two positions are included in this spreadsheet under the Commissioner's Office Administration and Finance group.
Those are two positions that had been previously
Right.
recommended, correct?
So those have been recommended, and that process will continue. I think as we've discussed as a group before, we really need some expertise on both of those. And that expertise is beyond the scope of this group. So we made
Correct.
those recommendations, and we have just approved the sort of slate of projects that you've summarized for us here today, that for recommendation of commissioners. So I think that takes care of the water quality part of what we were here to do. So next item on the agenda is an update of the letter of intent round 2 process. So this is the 5 million that we've allocated into a small and medium grant program. Is that the one?
Yep.
Okay, great.
Can I ask a question before we begin with this?
Dorothy.
I'm associated with an organization that has submitted an LOI, and I'd like to recuse myself from anything about this. So I want to disclose that and then ask for guidance as to how I should proceed relative to this next section of the agenda.
Can I just follow up real quick? Because, hey, Paul, yeah,
Yes.
times 3 for me. I mean, I'm on the board of 3 different organizations that are all putting in LOIs, and so I kind of feel the same way. I don't mind having a discussion about it, but it's a little bit awkward.
Yeah,
Not taking
this
action.
item on the agenda is only informational. There'll be no action taken by the committee on that. So I think it is, would be appropriate for everyone to hear the information that's going to be offered.
Right, yes,
Thank
I'll
you.
take the part that Vera Harik, Assistant County Administrator. Kara and I, and our county IT team and our county communications manager pulled together a letter of intent process that people were to submit information online to our county website. And through that process, we collected information, requested information, fairly detailed information from organizations interested in applying for up to between $100,000 and $500,000 for projects of regional benefit. And we were very clear about the criteria we were looking for in two public meetings. Projects of regional benefit projects would, to the extent possible, address the issues and circumstances exacerbated by COVID. Projects that would address access to services, address vulnerable populations, and so on. And through this process, and this $5 million that you all recommended, and then the county commissioners and the Assembly of Delegates then approved via ordinance. That we opened a letter of intent process that lasted for 6 weeks between the third week of August and the last week of September. We closed that on September 30th, and we received, as a part of this process, 122 applications for over $40 million for the $5 million available. So, needless to say, we're thrilled with the level of interest, and also very pleased with the quality of the projects that have come in. But needless to say, there has needed to be, and Kara and I have embarked upon a process of vetting the projects applied for, and in so doing, we made use of the evaluation criteria that this committee, set up and agreed to a month or so ago. A subset of those criteria are being used to vet these projects. 122 projects for $40 million is an unworkable numerator and denominator. So we are engaged in that process of scoring. We'll be making an announcement next week as to which projects will be credentialed for onward application in the county's ARPA application portal. We received projects in the following categories. Broadband, we received 7 projects in the broadband category. Housing, 14 projects. Water quality, water related, 27 projects. Public health, 15 projects. Community services of varying types, 9 projects. Early education, childcare, and education in general of kids 0 to 18, 9 projects. Also food security, 8 projects. Local business assistance, 14 projects, and 19 projects from organizations involved in the arts or historic preservation. So again, 122 projects for over $40 million. Questions?
Any questions from the committee?
I can show the criteria if you're interested in seeing how we're scoring these as well. I could put that up if you wish.
That's the criteria that this group recommended.
Yeah. Yes, Lisa.
Do you have a sense of the split between for-profits and not-for-profits in the application pool?
Yes, I don't have it at hand right now. I can certainly get that information. We prefer
Like offhand, like
offhand. But you know what? And offhand is typically dangerous, so I'll decline. But let me go away, do a little bit of a tally here as other meeting progresses, and I can come back with that.
Great. Kristen.
This might be premature, but in the interest of collaboration that we've been talking about all along, is there any opportunity to share some of the proposals that you think are worthy, but didn't, just because the dollars can't make the cut, for other potential resource and support in the community?
Yeah, certainly, absolutely. And though we're interested in, we don't have a fixed process yet for what to do with the projects that don't make the cut for this particular opportunity, because there are many worthy projects in there. I'm going to open up just the flow chart for the scoring so that people can see how this is working.
Thank you for that, Kristen. That is an excellent concept. So we definitely want to move forward with sharing some of this. I think probably what we'll see are that some of the proposals that came in for application for the $5 million through the LOI process might be, for example, housing related. So we might be able to move some of these projects over to the housing bucket that we're gonna discuss later.
One second, I just want to share my screen. So this spreadsheet should look familiar to you all, as soon as I can get to it. Because it directly incorporates work done here in this, by this body. And so these are the scoring sheets Karen and I are using. Karen and I did this in a blinded fashion. We both scored the projects independently of one another. And so in order to score well in this LOI, in this $5 million competitive process, your largest basket of points comes from having a single basket of points coming from having a regional or a sub-regional benefit to the idea. Up to 21, so that would be 23 points out of a total 100. You can score up to 21 points by hitting various regional challenges as set forth by the Cape Cod Commission in their work, with the addition of public health, healthcare, and food security as a regional challenge here. And an additional large basket of points was available if you were able to address one or more cross-cutting issues, namely accessing barriers to services, health, which would be health and other services. In other words, addressing barriers to accessing services, addressing diversity, equity, and inclusion, having features of those in your project, and vulnerable populations, and demonstrating that your project will take advantage of interagency, intertown, or interorganizational collaborations. In fairness to the LOI process, we weren't scoring the projects that were coming in terms of addressing social determinants of health yet, climate change mitigation and adaptation, and proven concepts or interventions, nor were we asking people to demonstrate a return on investment in ROI. This was sort of a first pass to get projects, to identify projects that would be have the necessary and sufficient qualifications to go on and then become credentialed to apply for the funding. Now, if we continue as a consequence of that process, they get through the ARPA portal funding and are evaluated by CLA and by us, and we're still in excess of the $5 million round. That's the amount budgeted. We will then undertake an additional scoring process that will bring in these additional elements.
Great, thank you very much, Vera.
Thank
Kristen.
So Vera, do you have an expectation right now of, with the invitations for the full proposal, are you going to try to get to that 5 million total? Like, are you, what's kind of the expectation with percentage of the invitations that you'll make for full proposal versus what you'll actually end up funding? Are you going to expect that like 50%, you'll fund 50% of the full proposals? Are you trying to get close to 100? Do you have any idea yet?
That's a great question. What we're doing is we're going to credential projects that attain a minimum score for application, right? And those projects are likely to come in around $14 million. In other words, so we've gone from the basket of $40 million worth of projects to a basket, a smaller number of projects, the basket of $14 million. So the process remains competitive. We want to get to 5 million, but we are not limiting those credentialed to apply to. We haven't prejudged, who gets to how. We haven't prejudged how to get to the 5 million. We're going to let the projects tell us that.
How the process works.
Yeah, there's going to be. Did I answer your question? Yeah.
If I could just add one thing, some of the discussion we're going to have today about housing projects may impact that, and so it's premature to.
Right. Everyone wants a bit more detail now. What we need to do is we're finishing we're almost finished with our scoring process for the letters of intent. We'll be making an announcement to those credentialed to move forward next week. And the portal for them to apply, they'll be credentialed and apply late next week as well. So, in short order, there will be a smaller number of projects with a much smaller denominator in terms of funding being asked for.
And just to remind people, I mean, the process is then, submission into the portal, a
Yeah.
review by CLA. That also is, they do a risk assessment, and then a second review by Powers and Sullivan before it comes to us. And so, we want projects that have achieved a particular score to go through the rest of the process and have that opportunity.
Very good. Thank you for that update, Vera.
Sure.
So we are about ready to move to item number 5 on the agenda, which is a recommendation around 3 of the ARPA funding for large projects focused on housing. Prior to that, I think it's appropriate just to do a little bit of a review. This committee has done a lot of work since June. We've worked through an ARPA mapping process to see where ARPA funds have gone federally on the state level. We've worked through regional priorities. We've created a $5 million fund small and large grant program that's out there. The response to that has been great. So that process is moving along. I know that's been a lot of work. So the county has already allocated of the 42 million, $10 million to the towns. Do we have an update on how much of that has been applied for?
Yes, Karen is.
Yes, hi there, everybody. So far, we're at 6.7 million on the street out of the 10 million that was given to the different towns. It's 6 towns and it's 7 different grants. Bourne chose to break up their allocation to 2 different grants. And the majority of them are for wastewater projects.
Great.
So we're moving forward with that in a very good fashion.
Awesome. That's good to hear. So 10 million off the top of the 42 million for towns. Most of that has been, or is it a little more than half of it is already on the street. That's correct.
Yes.
6.7.
Yeah. So that's going well. We've allocated 5 million for the small and recommended 5 million for the small and medium grants program. We've also recommended, I think, like a total of 3.5.
Put this back up here, this tally I have. It's at the bottom of everyone's spreadsheet, but I'm putting it back up here again.
There's like 3.5 to the commission for freshwater ponds, which was ultimately funded out of surplus and not out of ARPA. Another
That was
million,
2.5.
2.5 for that, but another million for housing.
Right.
And then today we've made the recommendation based on the spreadsheet of 12.7 million for water quality plus projects. About 10 million of that is for water quality projects.
Mhm.
So we are really sort of moving through the process now. And basically what that leaves for our consideration about 11.4 million for housing. So we have, as a committee, made a recommendation incorporated in the recommendations here today to bring on someone who can oversee sort of housing and what's the appropriate way for the county to engage in sort of housing strategy. And then we have discussed and taken testimony from the community at large about housing. And we've discussed the need for a comprehensive approach to housing that moves from homelessness through housing insecurity and transitional to affordable housing, market rate, and then workforce housing. So I think what we should discuss today is the potential to fence off aspects of that 11.4 to address areas that are in that housing layer cake that we've discussed. So we might be able to do that today, but if anyone feels like we need to take a little bit more time on this, then we could have a subsequent meeting. But based on the testimony that's come in as it relates to sort of the homeless population, there is sort of a need around sheltering and homeless respite programs. Limited number of people or organizations that could execute those programs. Housing insecurity and transitional, there are several organizations that are working on the Cape for that. That's an immediate need. We've seen a lot of displacement over the last 18, 24 months. And we see the changing face of homelessness. We see a much more elderly population in need of these services currently. Affordable housing, we've discussed that at great length, and there are several affordable housing projects on the Cape right now that are stalled or potentially in jeopardy, given some of the escalation in costs that have come along as a result of the pandemic and other issues. Some of those projects, I think, have applied through the LOI process. So we've got a sense of the need there. On the market rate side, we've discussed changes in zoning and whether there is another way to organize development efforts on the county level, potentially maybe through some sort of redevelopment authority or service provided at a regional level. And then we've looked at workforce housing and the need to address housing for J1, H2B visa holders, as well as year-round housing and the need for towns to look at zoning and the potential adaptive reuse commercial properties and some of the more outdated hotel stock that we have for workforce housing purposes. So if we were to say, oh, there's 11.4 million, and we thought that homelessness, because it has two aspects to it, the shelter and homeless respite program, we could wall off 2 million for that. Housing and security and transitional assistance could be $1 million there. The affordable housing piece, I think we really have to look at 5 million there to look at.
Hey,
some
Paul,
of
I've had my hand up for a while. I don't think you're seeing it. So
Oh.
just when you get around to it, no rush.
Yeah, we'll get right to you. I'm just going to offer sort of a framework for how we might be able to sort of discuss this today, that hopefully will let us make a decision, have discussion, make a decision about a subsequent meeting. So on the market rate side, there's the zoning and redevelopment, and then on the workforce side, H2Bs, J1s, year-round housing. So we could do $1 million there. And all of that, so I throw that out there as an example for a way that we could fence off money related to housing that addresses those kind of layer cake needs that we've discussed in the past. So with that as a preface to the discussion, Dan, go ahead.
Yeah, sorry to interrupt you, but my question actually was for the last agenda item, so that's why I kind of chimed in. I have a question. First of all, did anybody discuss, based on the 122 applications and the incredible response we got from that, actually increasing the 5 million? That's no question number one, and that would be a yes or no. It sounds like no one even thought of potentially expanding that amount. The other thing is, has anybody considered moving all of the housing proposals that were in the small grants over to the topic you're discussing now? If I remember right, there were a pretty big number that were housing and or homeless that were in the small grants proposals.
Yeah, that's a great point, Dan. I think, and I'm just sort of ballparking here, but what, 4 million of the 40 million were housing projects? Housing, homeless? Something along those lines, but Vera, go ahead.
The answer to Dan's two questions is yes to both.
Yes to both.
Yes to both. We're not, because we're operating under an ordinance where what's been appropriated is $5 million. The idea certainly has crossed our minds that maybe it'd be worthwhile to have a larger amount of money for these small and medium-sized projects, but we're not there yet with the ask. We're just finishing up the scoring at this time. And then the second question was
About moving the housing
yes,
project.
and
over. Yes, we have had-
there is again, we're staff, we're not authorized, but there is it's an obvious idea to take some of these housing projects from the small, medium-sized thing and move it into the context of this discussion as well.
Thank you.
Then there was a third question. Was there about how many projects of the 122 projects that came in? What was the total for housing requests?
Well, I think it was between 10 and 15 of the projects, but if it was $4 million, that would reduce to 40 to 36 if you moved them over. I'm not suggesting we do it. I was just curious as to whether anybody was discussing that. And thanks, I got the answer.
Okay, thanks, Dan. Great idea. But I think that does allow some flexibility. I think the beauty of using the LOI process is you get to look at what all the proposals are. Now there's an opportunity to see if we can group some of these people together, or if there are significant regional challenge areas that were applied for the 5 million in housing that we could then move into sort of the housing money. So whether we take part of the 11.4 million and shift it to augment the 5 million to fund housing projects that way, I think that's certainly a possibility moving forward. I would note, though, that when we've discussed some of these issues around housing in this sort of layer cake approach, there are a limited number of organizations that could respond in a way that's consistent with what the county sort of views as necessary to be done. So I'm not sure that another competitive grant process on the housing side would be appropriate. I think fencing this off and giving the county some direction in these areas on how to look for the appropriate strategic partners might be a better way to approach that. But open for discussions. Because other than this, we are at the end of our agenda today, coming up on an hour. I think Dan's point is a good one. And so as much as it may pain some of us, I think we probably do need to consider one more meeting where we come back with some more specific recommendations on the housing side, some of which will then be related more specifically to the LOI. And some language around specific direction on each one of these layers that we're talking about for housing, and to have that larger discussion. And that would be the final meeting of this committee, in all likelihood. Kristen.
So I'm not entirely clear on what our responsibility is here with the recommendations. I would certainly advocate for carving out a larger chunk for housing. That seems to make a lot of sense one way or another. I guess I don't feel like I have the information or really the skill and knowledge to be able to say like a certain amount in each of the different layers. And I feel like that would really depend on, again, the organizations that were positioned to do that. I just feel it's kind of arbitrary to say $1 million here, $2 million there, not knowing what organizations are positioned to do the work and which might be interested in applying or have already applied through the LOI process. So just a comment on that.
Well said. So I think we will have another meeting so that we can go through some of that, and just running through sort of the housing, how we might discuss the housing, how we might fence off some of this money and give direction. My sort of suggestion was that, just a suggestion for discussion purposes only. But I do think we need to fill in some of the blanks around that, related to how much might be moved over to fund the projects that have already come in through the $5 million program, and what's left, and how some of that county directed spending might happen. So if there's no issue with one more meeting, then that's what we'll plan. Probably.
Hey, Paul.
Yes, Dan.
I'm sorry to interject again, and it's hard to ask this question without sounding like a jerk, and I'm not trying to. I promise you, but I don't sense that we have any clear ask from the people who are ultimately making the decision as to exactly what they're expecting us to do at this point. And now maybe I missed a memo or something, but who is actually making the final decision? It's the county commissioners who are making that recommendation to the assembly. Is that correct?
Yes, the county commissioners have appointed this committee and asked us to make recommendations on the allocation of the entire 42 million. And that's what we've been in the process of doing, and doing that in an iterative way. Once our recommendations are made to the commissioners then, through an ordinance process that they've agreed on with the Assembly of Delegates, will approve, look at our recommendations, and then it will go through that process.
it was unclear to me how granular that was going to be, because to Kristen's point, I mean, for us to be recommending specific amounts, it really does get to be, you know, there's a materiality issue with how deep we can dive into that. We've made recommendations. I think if they came back to us and said, okay, we want you to take it to the next level, and I guess what you're saying is informally they've done that. They want this to continue to be an iterative process. Correct?
Yes, I believe they do. And so just as we've taken several weeks now to look at that general water quality direction that we gave to staff, and they've come back with the 10 million in water quality spending and the 12.7 that we looked at in total today. We could do something similar to that on housing. It would be less specific. But I think it's appropriate for this committee to do that. So what we can do, if we wanted to give the county administration any more guidance in how to structure that for us at our next meeting, now would be the appropriate time to do that. What I heard is that we should take a look at some of the requests that have come into the $5 million fund and see if maybe augmenting that $5 million with a certain sum to cover those projects that are related to housing might be one way to look at it. The other approach is to make sure that the regional challenge of housing in general and the comprehensive nature of it in all of the categories that we've discussed are addressed in some way. But we could certainly put that question and give that direction to the county administration staff, as we did on the water quality side, and then they would come back with some more specific discussions and recommendations for us to consider endorsing that would then go back to the commissioners at a subsequent meeting. Dorothy.
And Karen, you had your hand up before. Did you still have a question?
I took my hand down because it was a little bit redundant with Kristen. Just, you know, it makes me a little bit nervous, although I don't know that it's even in our scope. When I hear there's only a couple of organizations or a few organizations that can do something specifically, and just again wondering if that needs a little bit more clarity. Just because they're the only ones, are we looking at the intent here, or yeah, and that this isn't to say I don't think you've done an amazing job, because this is a lot to get through, and I think you have done a great job. The housing, it's just such a critical issue, and you know, some of it is in some areas sustainability too. So I don't want to waste, for example, $2 million. And again, to Dan's point, not sure what's in our scope or not.
Yeah, no, and those are great points. I think just to part of what we can discuss at the next meeting is if the homeless population in Hyannis was, you know, pre-pandemic around 80 individuals, about 400 now. You know, but there's only one shelter. So to go through a competitive grant process for that doesn't necessarily seem to make a lot of sense, but that's open for discussion.
Yeah.
As well as sort of the homeless respite program. I mean, there are some efforts that are underway that might need funding, but that's clearly up for discussion. I think the reason we need to meet again. So thank you for that, Karen.
Thanks.
And so may I ask now, and again, I'm afraid this is totally redundant and basically, Paul, I think you've answered it. But as I look at the qualitative differentiation between the two pools, so the 5 million is, you know, up to 500,000. We haven't defined what the, you know, large regional projects we're envisioning. But and again, at the risk of repeating what Kristen and Karen just said, and your direction to the administration, who've done, again, such a wonderful job. I guess the question I have is, if you think about outcomes, and when you say only one or two organizations can do X, is there a way of getting an analysis of what has been submitted in the 5 million? Who are the players? What of the layer cake are they actually addressing? And you know, there was a question before about collaborations and understanding. And again, I'm being redundant because this is really, Vera, I know what you and Beth and others would, and Kara would be doing in terms of the deep dive, but it does seem like there's a differential in terms of scale and scope relative to this. And so one of the questions is, when we think about the continuum of solutions, is there a desire to have it be on a continuum, to Karen's point about only one or two? Maybe there is a variety of options, and there are one or two that are going to undertake some of the major regional things, but maybe that's not $11 million. Maybe that there's more, to Dan's point, that should be allocated to the smaller ones. It's really hard to tell until we get the analysis. So we'll have another meeting and we'll get the analysis. At the end of the day, too, it is difficult for us to make the arbitrary decisions as to, that allocation without those frameworks.
May I add, of the 14 applications that came in for housing, nearly all have framed the ask within the small and medium category in terms of their larger scope of their work. So I think I'm sort of in violent agreement with you all as to the fact that this is definitely deserving of further analysis. What I would want to make sure is that those that applied in the small and medium round weren't necessarily circumscribing their thinking, but tried to try and fit into a smaller bucket, or on the flip side, that those with larger scale projects, knowing that they would be in excess of 500,000, didn't bother to show, and wouldn't have applied at all. So there's still a universe of housing related projects potentially out there that remains undiscovered.
And there would,
Hey, Paul, can I just respond to that really quickly?
Go ahead, Dan.
I think there's a really interesting, not conundrum, but I think all I'm suggesting is, to the degree that we fund some of the housing proposals in the small and medium grant, that we might score it against what's in the 11 million housing bucket, and therefore not sort of take it away from the non-housing applicants in that, out of that 122 applications. I don't know whether that's fair or not, but it is a way you could look at it, so that we can go ahead and fund some of the small and medium housing grants, but not at the expense of some of the other really good applicants that were not around housing, if that makes any sense.
Yes,
that makes sense. It's certainly a balancing act. But Vera's point too, that there may be some larger scale regional projects that didn't apply because of the limitations set on the 5 million, and we wouldn't want to change
right.
at this point and preclude that from consideration. So it does, we need to put a finer point on a lot of these issues and a little bit more direction for the committee's consideration. So we'll do that at another meeting in 2 weeks.
If I could just add, I think this has been really super helpful. And I think, Paul, what you started out by saying, this has really been an iterative process, right? So we had to get through the 5 million. We know what we got back. We're sorting through that. And I think all of these comments and thinking about how we might then look at the housing has been extremely helpful. So I just wanted to thank you all for those comments.
Thank you. Lisa.
I guess of all the comments that were made today, the one that I think creates the most urgency for me is talking about the increase in the number of homeless individuals today, and the urgency of the seasonality of where we are right now. I mean, we're in mid-October. Like, is this an issue we can take 2 weeks to start talking about, or are there programs that need to be, is there something that needs?
No.
No, there is. I don't want to override a process, but you know where I'm going with this is like, if we wait and wait and wait, it's June.
I can tell you, I mean, the timeline for this LOI process was that, funding checks wouldn't be going out until May. Anyway, so there's nothing in the basket of projects that speaks directly to the winter response.
Right.
But,
so is there a winter response that speaks to the needing funds?
Yeah, and I think I certainly respect and understand and agree with the comments that I made about there only being 1 or 2 organizations that can do this. But I think one example is on sort of housing insecurity and that transitional assistance. That's probably something we want to get out sooner rather than later. You know, and so maybe on the homelessness side, maybe on the housing insecurity and transitional assistance, to have that consideration and allow the county to move more directly without going through a competitive bid process would be the more responsible and effective thing to do. And we can consider that as a committee. Now, maybe with a larger chunk of the money that we do want a competitive process to support some of the affordable housing projects that are out there, in addition to some of what's come through. And we certainly would have the flexibility to do that too. So it's all up for discussion and consideration. And all your comments today have been really helpful and instructive on that. Dorothy.
Yeah, it just further questioning, and Lisa was going where I was going relative to timing. But more than anything, you know, Vera, you were talking about making announcements next week, and Paul, to your point about getting more information may actually better. Does it make any sense to allow in the intervening 2 weeks to allow the evaluation process and the credentialing announcements to continue or not? And so, because you'd want to get more information on the applications anyway, right? So that was just the question.
And Lisa, to your question, there was no winter response related applications in among the 122 from my point of view.
Not for this winter.
No, not for this. There's not there was no emergency asks.
Right. And I guess, is that a product of the timeline, or is that a, you know?
Yeah, certainly.
Definitely.
I mean, this wasn't meant as an emergency, you know.
Right.
Right.
So this has been really helpful. I think it brings, unless we have any other sort of input or questions or discussion.
Paul, I have to belabor the point 1 second. Is what I'm hearing that there is nothing that would preclude the commissioners from directing some of that money on a quasi-emergency basis to deal with the shortage of, it sounds like 320 beds going into the cold season. I'm not saying we should recommend it, but there's nothing to preclude them from directing those funds quickly, right?
No, and there are programs out there.
Right.
That's what I'm saying. Yeah.
Is it, which is to my point about there maybe only being a couple people that can do this. But we need to break up the housing discussion in order to have that and direct that. I think 2 weeks is an appropriate time frame for us to come back with more information on that.
And to Dan's question, you know, anything that the county commissioners would direct in that fashion would obviously have to go through an ordinance process.
Right.
Yeah, I guess my queasiness about it is I don't want them to be waiting when there's the critical urgent need out there for us to be recommending something on a timeline that might have people out there in December in frigid temperature with no house or no place to sleep. That's the point I'm making. So I don't want to be so beholden to process that they feel as though they can't use this money to react with the urgency that it was really intended with.
If I can just respond to that, thanks for that, Dan. So the county does convene the regional network on homelessness. When I was the director of human services, I was very involved in the winter response and coordinating it. But I am going to circle back to the director of human services, the regional network, and just kind of get a sense of where they all are right now with the winter response. It's typically something that you're starting to plan for in the spring for the upcoming winter. But I think that piece of information and data would be very important to produce, to look at.
Yeah, that all good. And I do think in 2 weeks is a way we might be able to structure a recommendation that, if necessary, could be fast tracked and not weighted down with an excessive amount of process. Good. I think that brings us to the end of our meeting today. I do want to just take a short minute, having been through sort of the creation of this committee and through the summer season, and a lot of discussions that have happened. And I just want to thank Beth, Vera, and Kara now. A lot of work has gone into this. program, a lot of good work. And so, and I think, you know, the committee owes you, thanks.
Well, I think we owe the committee thanks.
Yeah, we owe the committee, yeah.
And all you.
Well,
Thank you.
Well,
Likewise.
thanks. We'll get around to thanking ourselves.
Okay.
But I also want to thank the commissioners who have been responsive to the recommendations that we've made to date. And I really want to thank the assembly delegates. You know, they really have stepped up here and asked some really good questions and have given some really sort of important feedback to us as a committee and to the commissioners, and their ability to sort of work with the commissioners on this to get this grant program out there and funded has been incredible. You know, in particular, I've talked to Speaker Princey on several occasions and other members of the assembly, and really as an entire group, it's been impressive to watch them go through this process. So I want to thank the assembly, the commissioners, and the administration today, because we worked hard on our summer vacation, right? So they have done some spectacular work. So with that, I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Moved.
Second,
Well, not necessary. Thank you all. So we have to take a roll call vote one more time. Dorothy Savarese,
Aye, and thank you, Paul.
Wendy Northcross,
Aye, and thank you, Paul.
thanks to Guy on. That's enough.
aye, and thank you, Paul and all.
Karen Gard.
Aye, and thank you all.
Okay. Kristen O'Malley
Aye, and thank you.
and Dan, I'll always like to give you the last word. So
Well, I'll make it unanimous, and thank you, Paul, to you and to everybody in the county who worked so hard on this. You're absolutely right. But yay, aye.
thank you. Thank you all. We'll see you in 2 weeks.
Good.
Great.
Aye.
Bye-bye.